Hello, this is the post-lab video for experiment 4 which is on projectile motion. So sa experiment na ito, let's first have a short discussion on the experiment manual. Tapos let's see how the data looks like. So, nauna, if you recall, projectile motion is a type of motion wherein an object is thrown with an initial velocity subject to uniform acceleration due to gravity. So alam naman natin to. There's no need to dwell on this section. So let's go to the math. So sa projectile motion, meron tayong kinematic formulas that relate your position to your time. So sa projectile motion, per component ang equation. So meron tayong equation for x as a function of time and y as a function of time. Kung ayaw naman natin ng time dependent sa equations natin, we can simply combine yung x and y dito sa equation 3 para makuha itong equation 4. So it looks somewhat longer, pero wala ng time dependence. So you can absolutely get the position of your projectile vertical position as a function of its horizontal position. So yung pinaka-important sa equation or experiment na ito rather is this equation 5 which is on the range. So yung range na ito, so this is V naught squared sine 2 theta divided by G which is the acceleration due to gravity. So magamit natin ito mamaya. So if you recall, the experiment itself is done through PhET, yung simulation. So itong simulation na ito, where all of you have done this, where you have simulated a cannonball firing out of a cannon. So yung different locations ng projectile is defined by these dots na pwede ninyong i-track using this crosshair tool. So since all of you have done the experiment, quite good, might I add. So there's no need to dwell on the experiment proper. So dito, balik tayo. So familiarization with PhET. So part 1, measuring range of projectiles, trajectory, data analysis. So dito actually, yung pinaka-important ay ang elements ng graph. Yun yung pinaka-chinekan ko actually. Kasi the graphs themselves are correct. So dito sa table 1, table 2, there's nothing to check here. This is just listing of whatever you recorded. Sa figure 1, so dito, again, yung different plot elements natin ay X label, Y label with units, title or caption, for or legend if necessary, which is not always. Tapos, I think this is it. So anyway, yung details ng plot also play a role pero not as major. Most of the points come from the complete elements. So dito sa figure 1, let's discuss na lang yung mismong plot. So you're supposed to plot the range R versus sine 2 theta. So at first glance, medyo nakakalito siya kasi some of you might have recorded R versus theta, which is wrong. So may coding deduction yon. Pero yung tamang plot is R versus sine 2 theta. So if you recall dun sa ating formula na ang formula ay V naught squared over G sine 2 theta. So this formula is somewhat equal to the equation of a line. So for example, recall nyo that yung isang line ay y is equal to mx plus b, di ba? So kapag wala itong b na ito, this is just y is equal to mx. So yung x mo is sine 2 theta while yung y mo is r. So dapat ang makuha ninyong graph dito ay graph lang ng isang line. So depende na lang yung slope niya sa value ng m. So yung value ng m mo dito is just your v naught squared over g. So actually, from this experiment, you could also calculate the value of v naught. Kasi alam naman natin ang g, di ba? So that's one way that we can use the slope of the trend line. Of course, this isn't a requirement of the experiment, pero it's just nice to know na kung anong pwedeng maging use ng data na ito. So sa figure 2 naman, this is just a plot of y versus x. So para makita ang graph nito, we just have to go back to our equation 4. So sa equation 4, meron tayo actually graph na ng y of x. Pansinin niyo dito na ang highest order ng x dun sa right side ay squared term. So from algebra, kapag x squared ang highest term mo sa isang polynomial, you will end up with a parabola. So parabola lang ang expected ko na graph. So yung difference ng parabolas for the trials na pinlot ninyo ay basically just how wide the parabola is or saan siya nagma-maximum. Pero all of them should look like parabolas. So wala akong ginawang deductions dito kasi there are slight differences between plots. So some of you may have plotted na ganyan, paiba-ibang parabola, but some others may have put all the starting points at 0, which is also okay. Wala pinagkaiba, kaya okay lang yan. So now let's go to the questions. So may tatlong questions tayo dito. So unang tanong, are the graphs consistent with the expected behavior based on equations 4 and 5? So dito, sagot lang naman ay yes. So sa equation 4, figure 2 shows a parabola. So yes. Sa equation 5, figure 1 shows a line. So yes din. So it's really that simple. So number 2 naman, what assumptions must be made in equations 4 and 5 para magamit sila? So dito naman sa equation na ito or sa question na ito, syempre yung una nating assumptions are that V naught and theta are constant. So given naman na yan, di naman natin binabago yan during the experiment. Or yung theta at least for a set of data, di naman binabago yan. Yung mas important though na assumptions ay na no air resistance. And pangalawa, the projectile is close to the ground. So tong first na answer sa air resistance ay makikita natin mamaya kung bakit. Pero yung pangalawa, the projectile is close to the ground. This is because the value of G is only 9.8 meters per second squared only when the projectile is close to the ground. So if you recall sa Physics 71 ninyo, sa lesson on gravitation, kapag lumalayo na kayo from ground level, the value of G starts to decrease. So you have to be close enough to the ground in order for the approximate value of G equal to 9.8 meters per second squared to work. So lastly, what are the effects of air resistance on the range and final height of the projectile? So ito ay pinakamadaling mapapakita through a demonstration. So taas natin yung angle. Gawin natin 45 pala para maximum. And let us, max natin yung speed, sige. Tapos let's fire a projectile. And let's zoom out. So ito, yung walang air resistance. Now let's add air resistance. I-check natin ito and keep everything else the same. So let's fire our projectile now. So we are asked what happens to the final, so the range and the maximum height. Maximum height ito. So I think na-clarify naman to lahat. So basically, air resistance just decreases both the final, the range and the maximum height. So if I were to write my answer here, that is maximum height and range are decreased. So this is just the answer I'm looking for. Ito lang, okay na. So this concludes the post lab for experiment 4. Can watch the post labs for the remaining 3 experiments in other separate videos. Thank you for watching.